November 20th, 1943. Dawn breaks over the central Pacific, over a thin strip of coral and sand called Batio, part of the Tarawa atoll. The air is already heavy with salt and heat. The tide is wrong. The reef lies exposed like a white blade just beneath the surface. Beyond it, the lagoon is crowded with dark silhouettes, landing craft idling, engines rumbling, metal hulls trembling under the weight of men and equipment. Above, naval guns thunder in long, rolling waves, their concussions flattening palm trees and sending columns of smoke rising into the pale morning sky. This moment mattered far beyond this narrow beach. By late 1943, the Pacific War had reached a critical phase. The United States, reeling just 2 years earlier from Pearl Harbor, had shifted from survival to offense. Tarawa was not chosen for its size or beauty. It was chosen because it guarded the air routes to the Marshall Islands and, beyond them, Japan itself. To take Tarawa meant proving that fortified Japanese island defenses, designed to bleed invaders dry, could be broken. To fail would mean the island-hopping strategy might collapse before it truly began. Japanese planners had studied amphibious warfare carefully. Their doctrine was clear. Landings against prepared defenses were suicide. General Shibasaki KG, commander of the garrison on Batio, had turned the island into a fortress. Over 500 concrete bunkers, pillboxes, and artillery emplacements were carved into coral and reinforced with steel. Heavy coastal guns were sighted to cover every approach. Trenches linked firing positions like veins beneath the sand. Japanese intelligence estimated that no enemy force could take the island in less than 100 years. What the Japanese officers expected was hesitation, boats turning back, waves breaking under machine gun fire, attackers pinned helplessly on the reef. What they experienced instead defied their assumptions. When the first wave of U.S. Marines moved forward, the naval bombardment lifted and Japanese guns emerged intact from their concrete shells. Machine guns opened fire with mechanical precision. Shells tore through water and steel. Many landing crafts struck the reef and stopped dead. Marines climbed out into chest-deep water, some burdened with packs weighing over 60 pounds, and began wading forward under fire. The sound of American artillery became the recurring pulse of the battle. It never truly stopped. Naval guns resumed firing as close as safety allowed. Field radios crackled continuously as forward observers called for strikes. The thunder of shells landing inland, offshore, and directly on the beach created a relentless rhythm, an industrial roar that seemed to replace nature itself. For Japanese defenders, this sound became inseparable from the realization that American firepower was not merely intense, but sustained without pause. By the end of the first day, progress measured in yards had cost hundreds of lives. Official U.S. records would later confirm that nearly 1,500 Marines were killed or wounded within the first 24 hours. Entire units were pinned down behind seawalls made of sand and coral rubble. Medical officers performed amputations under fire. Engineers blew holes in bunkers using explosives carried across open ground. Yet the attacks did not cease. Reinforcements continued to arrive. Supplies continued to flow. Even as casualties mounted, the American assault did not lose momentum. Japanese after-action reports and post-war testimonies reveal growing disbelief among surviving officers. Diaries recovered from Batio described astonishment at the Americans' willingness to advance again and again across the same killing zones. The expectation had been that losses would break morale. Instead, Marines reorganized, adopted, and pressed forward. New landing waves brought fresh troops, flamethrowers, tanks modified to crawl over coral, and more ammunition than defenders thought possible to recognize or destroy. The contrast was stark. Japanese soldiers had been trained for endurance, sacrifice, and death. Many were prepared never to leave the island alive. But they were not prepared for an enemy whose material resources appeared inexhaustible. U.S. naval records show that more than 3,000 tons of ammunition were expended during the battle. Warships fired thousands of shells. Aircraft flew repeated close support missions, returning to carriers to rearm and refuel, then returning again. The sound of American guns became a symbol of something larger than firepower. It represented an industrial society fully mobilized, able to replace losses in men and machines without slowing its advance. As the battle dragged into its third day, Japanese resistance collapsed into isolated pockets. Bunkers were sealed, burned, or buried. Communications broke down. Leadership was shattered. When organized defense ended, nearly all of the island's 4,600 Japanese defenders were dead. Only 17 Japanese soldiers and 129 Korean laborers survived to be captured. U.S. casualties totaled over 1,000 dead and more than 2,000 wounded, numbers that shocked the American public when photographs of piled bodies and shattered equipment appeared in Life magazine.
For the
weeks
Japanese
later.
High Command, Tarawa was a psychological turning point. Internal assessments acknowledged that the enemy had demonstrated a new form of warfare, one in which casualties did not halt operations and where overwhelming firepower could be concentrated on a space no larger than a few city blocks. The belief that fortified islands could halt the American advance was irreversibly damaged. Future island defenses would still fight, but with the growing awareness that time and material favored the United States. The Marines who survived Tarawa carried its lessons forward. Amphibious tactics were revised, intelligence on tides improved, equipment was redesigned. The thunder of American guns would roll again at Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, each time louder, closer, and more devastating. Tarawa became proof that democracy's strength did not lie only in ideals, but in the collective capacity to mobilize, adapt, and persist under unimaginable pressure. In the end, the beach at Betio returned to silence. Wrecked landing craft rusted on the reef. Shell casings lay half buried in the sand. Palm trees stood shattered, their trunks splintered like broken bones. Yet the echo of that battle carried far beyond the Pacific. It carried into Japanese strategic calculations, into American doctrine, and into the understanding that wars are avoiding dialogues between ideologies measured not just in belief, but in production, logistics, and resolve. The thunder of American artillery at Tarawa was more than noise. It was the sound of a nation proving that it could absorb loss without surrendering purpose. It was the sound of abundance turned into action. And for those who heard it from the bunkers carved into coral, it marked the moment when certainty gave way to realization that the tide had shifted and it would not turn back.